Hi, today is my pleasure to speak with composer um, from Ecuador. She lives in Ecuador, but she born from in Venezuela, and her name is Adina Izarra. Hi, Adina.
Hello, Sandris. It's very nice to meet you.
Maybe you can give a short introduction to of yourself.
To to myself, well, I'm classical trained, classical piano trained. I went into classical composition and electroacoustic, contemporary art. Um, then I moved into only electronics and then back to acoustics. And nowadays I'm back into electronics, but I'm doing the live electronics. So I'm performing the live electronics. I have a duo with my husband, and he plays early instruments, and we transform them. He also does electronics, and so there we are. Everything is on the spot, on the day nowadays.
And what is a good musical composition for you, Adina?
Wow. I have a friend who used to say there are three types of compositions. There's one where you say, oh, that's very good. That's very interesting. There's another one that you say, ah, that's not a very good work. But there's one that causes you envy. I could have done that. That's a really good one. That's a really good one. It's like when you see musical solutions that are quite amazing and
Yes.
surprising. That's when I think that's a very good work. It strikes me on the logical part and on the emotional and musical part.
And can you
There are lots of good pieces. There are lots of good pieces with extraordinary orchestration and electronic solutions and all that. There are a lot of them, but some of them you say, "Wow, I should have done that."
and which was the last thing that you said, wow, I should have done that?
Oh, I can remember. I can remember at the moment. I can remember. I've heard lots of very good pieces, but for a few years I haven't been shocked by a piece.
And what is, let's say, what is your musical signature, or your musical ideas which you usually came back and try to develop and etc.
Um, well, in the 90s, I started writing things on birds and for a flute friend. And lots of people like that. And still up today, people ask me to write pieces on birds.
On
So
bird.
I moved on birds. I moved from the like messiaen type of thing, like imitating the calls with acoustic instruments, to, of course, the more natural thing that was recording the birds and transforming them electronically, which is what I still do, and I think that's a kind of a signature. And then using all kind of nature sounds, and some people have said I do how do you soundscape, but I don't really do soundscape because it's all too transformed, too intervened. But I think that will be my signature. Is that the
Birds.
case?
Birds.
Birds, yes, birds, yes,
I got it. And what is
yes.
your process of composing, right? This bird music. What is how you start and what stages you go through as a composer?
Well, it varies a lot. The last thing I wrote on birds was a piece for flute and tape, because it was for a competition, and a competition in Chicago. So I found out which was Chicago's bird, and of course it was the red cardinal. And so I got into the Sinoshant, that page which has the collectors. It's a free collector's bird, and I found an amazing cardinal song. I contacted the recorder, and I said, "Can I buy this for you?" Because I don't record the birds. People think I go up in the mountains with recorder. No, I don't. I usually get them from somebody else who record them better than I do. So I contacted them, and he really liked the project. He thought he never knew such a thing could be done. So he gave it to me as long as I gave him the credits. And so there I started back and forth. No, first listen to the bird, try to actually do the profile of the singing on the flute, and then processing the bird, and then creating lots and lots and lots of like data with the bird's processes, and then ensembling the whole thing. And of course, the natural thing with the flutist, which was Kate Hummel, trying the flute part. You know, this can be played. This is too, because it was for a level between 15 and 17 years old, the competition. So he said, no, they will never be able to play this, and which that's something very difficult I find as a composer, to know exactly which level the instrument has. And
Mhm.
I always have to appeal to a performer who will say this type of thing cannot be done at 17 years old. And you know, once I have the flute part ready with some ideas of how it will go with the electronics, it comes to the actual, not mixing, because it doesn't, it's just playing through the tape, seeing what's going on. And then the hardest part is to actually do a score, where you have to tell the performer how the tape is going, other than the actual chronometer marks. um, that's like the procedure. It's a lot back and forth, a lot working with the performer. I have been very lucky to be able to work with performers all along my life, and so they always give you the exact measure of not only whether it can be done or not for the flute, but the level of the performers.
And you live in Ecuador, right?
Yes, I've been living in Ecuador for 5 years now.
And before in Venezuela, right? Or
Yes, I lived in Venezuela until 2016. And then we came to Ecuador, to Universidad de las Artes, the University of Arts in Guayaquil, which where I work now.
and right. So how much, right? How much impact on your signature or on your musical thinking is that you are living actually in you lived a lot in Venezuela, right, and now in Ecuador, right? Would you be, or in other words, would you be completely different a composer if you would live all your life in Berlin?
Let me live all my life in Berlin, and I tell you. Um, in fact, we live in Guayaquil, which is on the tropics, and is indeed very similar to Caracas, where I live. The people is very similar, the humor and the joking and the spontaneity of the people is very similar. From, I would say there's more spontaneity on the people, and we have been very welcome here. So in that sense, it's not like if I go to Berlin,
Yes.
which is obviously very different. Birds here are amazing. We have these parakeets. How do you say, they fly this time of the year? They go through the city. The sound world in Guayaquil is fascinating, which really attracts me. So in that sense, I don't think it has affected me from the point of view of my sound world. What has really affected me, on the good sense, is
Yes.
like there are lots of performances. So it's not so much that I write the piece, I wait for somebody to play it, I rehearse. It's like in 2 weeks, in 1 week, and that's where I came to start performing my own things, because I have to have them like ready made. So I have pictures and things like that, and I started improvising because there's a lot going on. So that has been really a change.
Yes.
Things are not so formal, and you have to produce really quickly, really
Yes.
quickly.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And uh, would your music would be same if you would be a man, right?
Haha, how could I tell? I don't know. That's a that's a that's a question I've been asked before. How would I know? How would I know? Difficult to say. I have to say that in Caracas, where I live some 20 years before coming here, the the new music is not a very rich movement. There are not commissions, there's not government money for the new music. In that sense, men and women are, we were suffering the same. And I didn't see one man who will, because he was a man, having more stuff, more concerts, more commissions than I did. So in that sense, I I didn't feel any privilege of men or privilege of being a woman.
Yes, got it.
Uh,
So what are you saying, right? You're saying that if you would be a man, you wouldn't achieve more.
Not in my case. No, I don't think so. Not in my time and in my case. No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
And looking back, right, 10 years back, how your music changed?
Uh, well, maybe not 10 years, but say 15, 20 years. I was more worried and concerned about the seriousness of my music, the seriousness.
Seriously?
Yes, I'm much more light now as I'm improvising and walking more on stage. Before I didn't play my music. The most I did was like do the electronics, like the diffusion from outside, and I I am more ready to confront with the what happens on stage, the event as such. I would say 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I will write a score and I will suffer incredible if it didn't come up the way I wrote it. And I will work a lot with the performers, and things had to be done the way I thought they had to be.
Yes.
And that was a big worry for me. Doing an orchestral piece was very stressing, um, because I always needed more rehearsal than I was given. I don't write very easy, and it was all a very serious business, a very worrying and serious business. I'm far more light now. Of course, I love when pieces are played impeccable. But what is happening now for me is that I'm doing the thing myself. So it's far more fun. I'm really enjoying it far more than the suffering I I had before if things were not impeccable.
Yes. Yes.
So that's a big change. I don't know whether it's because I move away from my country or it's a thing of age. Simply, it gets to a point that you say I cannot go on suffering because the rhythm is not right or because
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Yes. We just start loving ourselves more and more and more, right, by age.
yes, 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 yes.
At least I noticed one thing that you are, let's say, that you recently start working more on multimedia pieces with videos as well.
Yes, I have a well. There was this problem of perfection in performance. So I was trying to find a way. Uh, Electronics were the obvious thing, tape music, but that was very. It was not exciting to go and listen to a tape piece on it. Even if you do the eight octophonic thing and the
Yes.
speakers, but it wasn't ever the same as. So I decided that I wanted something else to keep the attraction of the people, and I went on in video, but traditional video, a tape edited.
Yes.
And um, from there, I started moving to the live visuals, which is I find amazing. I'm still working on them, recently we did a collective work, 6 of us, with a dancer and other performers. And the amazing thing is that I could move the visuals and do a kind of pas de deux with the dancer
Yes.
live there. That was very, very, very exciting. But yes, it always attracted the same thing. Some maybe 20, 30 years ago, you have film was very expensive. You have to go to a lab with all the development. Video was very poor somehow, and also very expensive. Because the equivalent in tapes, home tapes, were very, very poor in quality. So it was not really until digital video came back that I could feel I have a very high quality studio at home on a laptop. And that's why I really started working. But I always wanted to work. While I was at university, I did some film works and analysis of film and film music and these things. But it was like quite inaccessible for the ordinary people. Now I find with the laptop, you have all the means to do HD 4K
Yes.
films,
But so you
much easier.
this live videos you're doing on your own, right? As I understand, yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I usually couple with some other performances. Sometimes I do the electronics with the video. Sometimes I do only the video.
Yes.
I have to deal with the. I build myself like a patcher where I can perform visuals,
Yes.
like very much like I perform electronics or
Yes.
perform
Yes.
an
And,
instrument.
yes. And do you use other media as well, and dance, or because as I understand, you said that you do something with dance as well, right?
Yes, we recently done a performance with dance. There were five musical performers, a dancer, and me on the actual live visuals.
Nice, very nice. And you are right, as I understand you. There was switches when you do acoustic, and then electronics, and then again, right? So how does this technology development influence you, right?
Well, I was trained at York University in England, and they have a studio which was, I think, very Shakespearean. Lots of recorders, noise reduction, mixers, no synthesizers at the time. So we weren't told synthesis or anything like that. It was more like recording, cutting, transforming, and that was my experience. But then that's very expensive studio. You need the price of one of those recorders which have very high quality and all that. So when I went back to Venezuela, it was really impossible to have that kind of setting for me, and there was no the studio in Venezuela for me to work. So I started buying keyboards. This is the time of the DX7 and all the 1980s digital MIDI keyboards. But I didn't like them. Maybe because they were mostly tuned in the 12 tones, and most of them were quite low, the actual programming them. No, they have lots and lots of incredible banks of sounds, but I couldn't manipulate them. And as I haven't been able to work on synthesis, it just didn't. I didn't like it. So I gave up. I gave up electronics. I had lots to do, but I gave up electronics until about in 2000. Somebody that I've heard this story of mine say, go and try Max MSP, because Max MSP is the studio you talk about in the 80s. You will be able to manipulate samples, um, to work with samples, and you can even do them live. So I just went absolutely mad with Max MSP. It took quite a while to get to learn it. And I worked on that for lots of time. And then a friend of mine said, well, as you really like software, go and study Super Collider, which was a free synthesis software. I said, well, I never done synthesis. I will need somebody to teach me. And then I went on. But I like, first of all, to have the lab on a laptop. On a laptop, and you can either do it the concert from your laptop, or you can play on the laptop. You can design your own instrument and perform according to your capabilities. And then another thing I started doing a lot is like transforming acoustic instruments live as part of my
Mhm.
performance. So I have an input for an instrumentalist, and then transforming that sound, but in the same idea of improvising. Improvise. I started doing. I remember it was a piece for Archiluto and electronics. We were going to perform it in Mexico in one of Rodrigo's festivals, and I had done all kind of pedals and buttons for Ruben to play, and he said it's just like too much. Like I lose my attention on the actual music I'm playing if I have to do a pedal, a button. Why don't you do them? And I say, well, okay, but then I would have to have the score in front of me because I didn't know it by heart. And as we did it that way, I took away all the things from him, the pedals, the buttons, and all that. I started playing from the laptop, and of course, I started improvising uh, with the electronic, and that's how it started. Nowadays, I have far more tasks to do while we are playing. And at the beginning, I will strictly follow my score and do the buttons and the programming. I say my score, but somehow watching the score, pressing the buttons, listening what's going on, it was just too much. I say, well, I give up the score. I do it improvising by heart, and that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing at the moment.
Mhm. Mhm.
Really, don't follow in a score, but having some clues of how things are going, and having lots of fun.
And what about Max SPM?
Ooh, well, that's my, how you say, battle horse. Battle horse, because I find it very easy to program things that I will do control.
Yes.
Control. For example, I do all my visuals with the jitter, which is the Max MSP and jitter, the video part, and I can perform on the computer the visuals, and at the same time I can design that I can perform certain synthesis or play some samples if I want. So I do like an instrument. This is an instrument I designed for myself. I even do all the piano fingering on the keyboard in such a way that I have this memory of where things go. And I know other software uh, do that as well, like Pure Data, even Super Collider does that as well. But with Max, I'm very comfortable nowadays. I've been working on Max um, almost 20 years, and I teach Max as well, which has been a great pleasure. Yeah, it's about 20 years just teaching Max MSP. I think it's an incredible tool
Yes.
that opens your mind. I remember in the 70s when I used to go to concerts on aleatoric stuff. I will hate it. I say, I don't like aleatoric music. I like to organize my ideas. But of course, was that this kind of happening performance, which I didn't quite enjoy. But when I started learning on Max MSP, it brings all this possibility of control aleatorism, where it is aleatoric, but somehow you put the limits.
Mhm.
And that really fascinated me. In fact, that opened my mind to many things. It looks very much like all those notations in the maybe the 70s, where you have modules, where you have improvised on certain notes to keep it for 15 seconds. Many like Luciano Berio works have those type of things where you can control the actual what's happening, but it's somehow free. And like Max allowed me to manipulate that type of thing, which somehow it really influenced me in the way I would write.
Got it. Got it. And what do you fear the most as composer?
Fear.
Yes. What is your composer fear?
Not to be played anymore. Like yes, exactly. That my pieces are not played and nobody is interested anymore. I think that's the worst part. It's an ego thing, you know.
Ego thing.
Yes. Because even if in the worst case a piece is not played well, there's always somebody who liked it, and he will, even if it wasn't what you wrote, somebody will say, I like it, I enjoy it. There is a musical moment, even if there are mistakes, but not to be played is really the worst.
Yes. Got it. Got it. And now, question from my friend Francois Charan. He asked. This question is asked almost to every interviewer. Why do you still compose?
Why? Because I enjoy very much. I enjoy very much. Really, that's the only reason.
Yes. So it's some kind of moments of happiness, moments of flows.
Totally. But it had to be for a project. What I don't do is to write for the wardrobe, you know, for the to keep it there. That's why lately I haven't written acoustic music. I don't I don't write an orchestral piece or a quartet or a piano piece if I'm not asked for.
Yes. Yes. Got it.
If I am, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. Uh, so what I'm writing at the moment is mostly for the group of performers we are doing at the moment, for projects, specific projects we have,
Got it.
but not in abstract like.
Yes. Yes. Um, and now, question: you as part of, let's say, part of new music community, right? In South America, and particularly in both countries, in Venezuela and Ecuador, how how new music landscape change during this century in Venezuela?
Oh, a lot. During this century or during the last century?
This century. Yes.
This century. Um, Venezuela has a political process that we cannot avoid. A continuous process of destroying the country, and down has gone all the musical world and all the new music. It has been very much affected. So we cannot understand the process of new music isolated from what's going on uh, politically. That's one of the reasons I had to leave. But in general, say they're more interesting, more teaching new music, more composing. People do want to compose, and are more interested in the contemporary works. But still, in Venezuela, the orchestras that are surviving there, they still prefer to play Tchaikovsky and Beethoven ninth than 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 new music. That has been a steady thing for say the last 20 years of the 20th century, and these 20 years. Um, Performers prefer, depending of the performers, but they prefer to study and play traditional things than new music. And as there is no government support to play new music, like in Europe, for example, that you can go to the government and get some money for commission, and then you have to play 20 times in Germany as part of your subsidy. There isn't such a thing. So it's a very personal thing of a performer who wants a new music. Um, and as I say, the thing is the political is dragging the country down, so we cannot appreciate it that
Yes.
isolated.
And how is this, let's say, political 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 situation or political changes in Venezuela, how they impact new music community?
Well, let me tell you that many of my generation had to leave the country, so they are now composing somewhere else, playing somewhere else, which is a shame because in my case and most my contemporaries, we were sent abroad to study, to get PhDs. That cost the government of the time a lot of money. And we were very well educated in conservatoires, in a university who did music, and we were creating a lot of generations with that knowledge we brought from many parts of the world. There were lots of performers and composers and conductors that in the 80s went abroad and brought back fantastic knowledge of, especially in classical music. And many of us had to leave the country.
And
So that's a how would you say, a failure for
yes,
the new music world in Venezuela. It's a surviving thing, you know. It's a
and
surviving thing.
it's somehow it's some kind of when you are saying you need to leave, right? So it's just government pushing you out, or there is no.
Well, let me tell you that in the year 2000, I earned like $2,500 a month, and in 2016, I earned $2 a month. So the economical situation got to a point that one said, I have to go and find somewhere else to live. And
Yeah,
many people, this has many, not only to musicians, to engineers, architects, biologists, doctors. Very much the middle class that had studied abroad had to leave. I
you are.
had to leave to survive. Had to leave to survive.
Yeah,
Not that I'm not political prosecuted or anything like that. It's just a question of.
of living.
Yes, yes, just like that.
And in Ecuador, what the situations there? How is this?
Well, they have. This is 5 years since they did this University of the Arts, and they have attracted lots of PhD musicians and artists, filmmakers, and it's a very strong international community. They have this policy of having good salaries and opportunities, so they can found the university on very strong grounds. And so far, it has been very good. It has been very good, and
Yes,
it, kids come from all over Ecuador to study in Guayaquil.
yes. And how musical language changed, right, during this century?
Um, During this century, well, I don't know. I don't know. It's a generational thing. To my own surprise, younger people still very much into nationalism, even here in Venezuela. They like to they like to compose on national rhythms, and it's very strong here and in Venezuela. They have to they first go through this very strong nationalism,
Yes,
and maybe maybe they will change into more avant-garde things, or avant-garde, or say experimental things, to put it
yes,
in a way. But the nationalism is very strong here as well.
yes,
Uh, People like to do a symphonic pasillo, a symphonic joropo, a string quartet, but I do take folk songs and put in string quartets.
yes.
I think that's very strong.
Yes, and do they mix these languages with um, this national or traditional, right, music language with new music language of Europe or United States? Are they
It
mixing?
It varies a lot. It varies a lot. It varies according to their own experience of this music. Here I found I work on the master's degree in composition here, and they are fascinated by minimalism and this tonal consonant thing, beautiful texture of minimalism.
Yes,
And they like very much doing like folk music with minimalism.
yes,
I must say it mixes very well. It mixes very well. Um, that type of thing. More atonal thing. Um, some things, but atonalism doesn't mix very well with
yes,
with folk music. But
yes,
there are kind of experiments. What I found is that people don't know this repertoire, so that's one of my things is getting people to know the new music or what has been last year's new music. And I work a lot on that. I work a lot on that. I do repertoire analysis, so at least I know what else can be done other than folk music, because
got
they are not folkloric musicians. That's the thing. They want to be classical musicians,
yes,
classical composers, but they don't know the repertoire. So well, I think I would like them to know the repertoire, and then they will decide whether they like 12 note techniques or not.
got it.
But as I tell you, minimalism is the king.
Yes,
They do love minimalist works.
yes, yes, got it. And what about all this multimedia language? Does it become more and more popular in Venezuela and Ecuador?
Well, on the pop world, it has been very popular. It is very strange to see a pop concert or a rock concert without visuals at the back. That's like a standard,
Yeah,
and even not pop, but even like popular music like bolero, salsa, and all that. They all have visuals. It is the classical work that has been slagging behind in the visual aspect of the. You go to a symphonic orchestra to hear Beethoven, and it's a black curtain
yes,
at the top. But I think young people need that. I don't know. They maybe need more stimulus. And some interesting things are done in other parts of the world with classical music and visuals and things like that. And I think it is coming, but as it is not taught on conservatories and things like that, there are still people who do classical music and don't even look at pop or rock or whatever. Um, maybe that will come, but I think it's behind. It's behind. In fact, I find myself in some theaters that they don't have a proper projector or a proper screen, and it's very poor. They have fantastic acoustic and they have fantastic microphones, but it's very poor. It doesn't occur to them that it's something to
yes.
be needed. So it will take a while, I think, to be a standard to have visuals in concerts.
And how strong is all this decolonization notion, right? That you were colonized and now you need to free yourself and go to find your own roots, or how strong is
Is
that?
that possible? Is that possible? Oh, it is very strong. It is very strong. But I do believe that here the colonization is more strong from the north, from the States, than it was ever from the Spanish. The Spanish. It's very complicated theme. It many times had to do with the way you look, which I'm not gaining anything from the way I look. Uh, but it is many teachers and universities do believe in that this can be done, and they are teaching the students the importance of this aesthetic or this theory. But what I find is that sometimes they cannot tell of the folk music what was really Spanish. For example, all the plucked instruments came from Spain. All the guitars, the charangos, and all the instruments. So mostly flutes were here before the Spanish arrived. But 99% of the folk music of Latin America has some kind of plucked instrument, a guitar, a requinto, cuatro, charango. So how you decolonize that? So where do you stop uh, eliminating things which are Spanish or American? I mean, get rid of all the technologies. Don't use Zoom. Don't use. It's a very difficult it's a very difficult thing. Uh, I think what I personally think is they do have to get to know their own culture, which is sometimes they don't know their own music, they don't know their own traditions. I think that's the point. But to dissect the fact that that tradition was pre-Hispanic or post-Hispanic, it's just too much. Where do you end? And then the other thing that happens is that previous to Columbus, they were colonizing cultures as well. I mean, the Incas were quite strong, colonizing and brutally killing people. So how far do you go? How far do you go? Who colonized whom? Who killed whom? Um, but it's a very strong aesthetic in this part of the world. I must say, more here than in Venezuela. Um, it's very fashionable. It's very fashionable, and you will find it in most papers and in the law. And for me, that's very new here.
Yes.
That's that I had to learn to live with this. Who was the colonialist? That's I still haven't come to terms with that.
Yes. Got it. Got it. And how new music audience change during the century?
Uh, well, it is. I find that the specialized new music concert always has very little people. I believe more than mixing. So you have Bach, Izarra, Mozart, and Berio, for example,
Yes.
to mix them as ordinary repertoire. And even in recitals of young people, it is better. You were there to listen to Paganini, and then came, I don't know, Izarra, and so you take it as that works better than specialized new music festivals. I believe in that.
Yes. Yes.
I believe in that.
Yes. And what is your things where this new music goes, right, in Venezuela and Ecuador? Which are the main trajectories of growth now?
I didn't get that. Can you say again?
What are the main trends, right, and who shapes them? Where new music goes, right?
Who shapes them? Well, as I said, like a very modern nationalism is still the preferred things. Um, Works like the Mexican Arturo Marquez, the Danzones, which for huge symphony orchestra based on folk rhythms, that's very much liked and preferred.
Yes.
And you see that when the orchestras travel abroad, that's the kind of new music they take. Somehow, that's the kind of new music you expect from Latin America.
Yeah.
Loud, colorful, rhythmic. You don't expect atonal music from Latin America somehow. Um, yes, that's I think that's the trend. I think if you look around the successful Latin American composers abroad, they have this trend of this mark of the colorful rhythms of Latin America, which I've also used,
Yes.
but let's say it's not my strong part.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that's the trend. Here in Ecuador, we have a very famous composer who is now 80 something, which is Messia Masuashka. He worked in Cologne with Stockhausen, but he left the country 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And his music is played because he is the master, but not many people follow. Not many people follow him. All of them know him.
Yes.
That
Yes.
is very important. But it's not the type of thing that people like to. I think they don't feel identified. Um, if you're not European, to identify with, say, atonal music is difficult. It's like, why are they doing that? Why do they want to leave tonality, which is so nice?
Yes.
Uh, it's difficult. There were trends, and it's quite funny because in Latin America, most of the trends were politically related. Like you find that the leftist avant-garde were atonal, and the traditional that were related to the dictatorships, they were nationalist. And you can study the development of 12-note technique in Latin America, uh, politically associated with left or right, left or right. But atonal music, that 1970s atonal music, is very little played. It's very little played. It's not cared neither by the publics nor by the performers. Performers somehow don't like it because they are not trained, they don't know what it's about, they don't see, as we say, the cheese in the toast is what the expression we use. That typical acoustic atonal music. Um,
Got it. Got it. And what is the new music role in Venezuela society or in Ecuador?
very, very little, very little. I must say that it's like um, it's things that people like to do, but it's not popular. It's not played. You have to like it, and some people prefer to do something else. And even in things like film and in theater and in dance, they prefer to bring pop musicians or popular commercial musicians to do music for them rather than new music uh, for their for the performances. And I think that's the case also in Venezuela. You might be a very avant-garde film director, and you will never think of bringing a new music composer to do your music. You look for somebody on the pop world, on the folk world. Um, I don't think there is a. I don't think it's a very. We are strange people. We are minority. Uh,
Got it.
I don't know what the times will change. I mean, Schember used to say that his tunes will be whistled in the streets. I don't think that came to be, and I don't think that will ever came to be. Uh, I think looking on 100 years old theories of atonal new music, that was like a cul-de-sac, and some things move on. But the world of atonal music either produces a new style or it will remain as a repertoire, interesting. There's a lot in it, and it's very. We can learn a lot from studying it, but orchestras don't like playing Botzek,
Yes. Got it.
Lulu. It's a very difficult repertoire. It's very difficult. Let's
Yeah.
start with that.
And the last question: what would be your three suggestions to younger composers? Right.
To younger composers, first of all, they have to know lots and lots and lots of repertoire. They have to listen to lots of music and to all kind of music. First of all. Second, they have to get into the technology world, not to do electronic music, but they have to have a laptop. They have to know how to use an editor and to mix their own music, and they at least have to know what it can be done. And third, Um, well, I think I will tell them to play the music. Like, do not sit at home waiting for somebody else to play. Do whatever. Get playing. Get playing. Find your own ensemble. Found your ensemble. Get some friends to play with you. But do not write music to stay on your desktop until an orchestra maybe point out that you might get. That's far more fruitful than sending works for competitions and things like that. I think but get to know the repertoire, find different things, improvise, and that will be what I will tell them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Adina, for this.
No, thank you to you for your interest in my work. It was really nice to meet you. Maybe one day we'll meet in person.
Yes, I hope so.